So this is a little video I'm going to do about rebuilding your smoke unit. Now this one started out pretty cruddy, as you can probably see on the inside there. The cardboard insulator is glued in, and there's a lot of crud in the well where the smoke fluid is stored as well. So what I do to get this out is I take an X-Acto knife and carefully run it on the edge of the cardboard. You gotta be kind of careful because it's really easy to cut the cardboard, especially when it's stuck in as bad as this. Once I have worked my way all the way around all the edges, if you get lucky it'll come loose. Now this one took quite a bit of digging and it's not in the best shape in the world, so it might be a good idea to come up with a replacement, either a used one out of another smoke unit that came out easier, or a replacement one that's brand new. So I've taken the base unit and I've cleaned it up, gotten all the old dried up smoke fluid off it using brake cleaner, which works pretty well. There's a little spot there. You just have to be really careful and make sure that everything is totally dry before you start reassembling, because that brake fluid is extremely flammable. You don't really want to have flames shooting out your smokestack. Now one modification I make is I like to take these two holes right here and make them a little bit larger than they come stock. And what that does is it makes it so that the wick can pass through those holes without being crimped, and that helps with the flow of smoke fluid from the well up to the area where the smoke fluid burns. So I'm going to drill those out to 1/8 of an inch diameter, which is what I have here in my handheld drill. Normally I would put this in a vise, but I can't hold the camera and drill the hole at the same time over by my vise, so here we go. Chips. Now for wick choices, I usually use Tiki Torch replacement wicks, which you can cut open and you'll get little sections like this on the inside that work perfect for replacing the smoke unit wicks. And I find that 2 pieces fits through that little hole we just drilled out really well. You can also buy pre-made wicks from Portlines. It's a really good choice as well. The only thing about these is, for the way I do it, I like to use a little less resistance than the way these come packaged, and you might want to cut 2 inches off the nichrome wire before you install it to get it closer to a lower value of about 25 to 30, which is what I like to use. To assemble your wick, take your 2 pieces of wick material, and I know you probably can't see it, but there's an 8-inch piece of nichrome wire between my fingers. And then this little tool I made out of a thin piece of very stiff wire, which will help in threading the wick through the unit for the smoke unit. And then this is just a little piece of the tubing that comes like with a can of WD-40 to stick in the nozzle to concentrate the spray. So I've taken my wick material and put it in the end of the vise so that I can hold it some tension with my other hand. Then I'm going to take this red tubing and hold it somewhere close to the center of the wick material. I'm holding it between my 2 fingers, keeping a little tension on it. And I take the nichrome wire and pinch it under those 2 fingers as well, leaving 1 inch to 1.5 inches sticking up where it can be reached later. And you carefully start winding it around the wick and the red tube This is 8 inches of nichrome wire, which tends to give me that 25 to 30 ohm resistance I'm shooting for. And I wind it with just a small amount of space between each winding, and pulling it a little bit snug so it's kind of crimping the wick material. But that will loosen up later when I take the red tubing out, and it'll make it so that we're not choking off the wick material and allowing the smoke fluid to flow. Usually comes out to somewhere between 12 and 16 windings with that length of wire. That's pretty close there. And I pinch the winding section between my thumb and index finger, and I start to spin the red tube. And as you spin it, it'll get easier and easier to turn because little pieces of the filaments of the wick will get in between there. And then once it gets easy to pull, you just slide it out, and you have your newly wound wick material. So now for the assembly, if you look, you can see the holes are a little bit enlarged where the wick passes through. I wound up using a new insulator, new old stock, because of the condition of the one that I took out of here. But before you start your assembly, you want to check and make sure that this little hole right in here is clear, because that's where the air comes through that pumps the smoke through the smoke unit and out the smokestack. We stick the insulator in. You'll notice one end has a little notch in it, the other side has a little hole in it. The notch goes towards the front of the smoke unit. Then you take this little tool that I custom made for this job, slide it over one end of the wick. Be sure you get all the wick material inside it. Then you take the two legs, pass them through the hole, and pull gently. Pulls the wick through the hole. And same thing on the other end. Legs through the hole. Pull. Then you carefully just start working the wick material through the hole so that the new coil winds up right in the center . Now you can adjust the windings a little bit if you need to. Sometimes they'll get to where they're touching or too spread out. You just have to do it very gently. In most cases, I would say it's probably better to have the windings closer together when you first wind it, because it's easy to spread it out. If you try to push them together, you're more likely to have some that are touching. But even if you have one or two touching, it doesn't make a huge difference in the resistance. So next you want to put your cover on. I always like to start out by putting the long lead on first because it's less likely to fall out while you're loading up the second one. Slide it through the hole and carefully put the second one in. And then take a couple of your screws just to kind of hold the cover in place during the rest of the assembly. Then we're going to fold up the wick inside the well here. I have the cover standing by. I usually fold it forward once, and then back, and then forward again, and then cut off any excess right behind the screw holes. fills the well like that. Then I'm going to stick some smoke fluid in it just to kind of help contain it while I'm putting the cover on. And it also primes it for when you use it the first time. Not a good idea to fire it up dry because you may do damage to the wick. And of course it sprung out. Alright, so now you want to take the two ends of the nichrome wire and wrap them up good so that you'll have good electrical contact. You just grab that wire with some pliers and wrap it around the post, and then same with this one. Now it's ready to install the last couple of screws. And once those are in, it's ready to be installed and wired up. If you have an ohm meter handy, you might want to check just to see that you got the resistance you want in there. Looks like it's right in the range we were shooting for. And when you have it all assembled, this is what you get.